Everyone. Hope you had a good lunch. So we're going to talk about something fun and we're going to talk about something complicated. I hope you all enjoy it. The map no longer tells the full story. River shifts, coastlines vanish, and people cross borders that politics refuse to draw. Climate change, war, and hunger are creating a slow, relentless migration that no wall can stop and no bureaucracy can fully comprehend. Yet compassion remains trapped behind paperwork and fear. Nations debate sovereignty while families search for safety. The question is no longer who belongs where, but how we choose to define belonging itself. In the age of moving borders, humanity, not geography, must decide who we are. In this session, we're talking about borders that move, migration, morality, and the politics of compassion. For this session's speakers, I'm going to call on to stage Mr. James Angelus, founder and president of International Security Industry Council of Japan, ISIC. Karori Singh, former director and emeritus fellow of South Asian Studies Center, University of Rajasthan. Zuraida Binte Kamaruddin, former Minister of Plantation and Commodities of Malaysia. Narayan Adhikari, Southeast Asia Lead, Accountability Lab, Nepal. And finally, last but not the least, Tausif Raina is an active politician in Jammu and Kashmir, India. Raina has also served as the mayor of Baramulla town. He's the co-founder of the youth think tank in Jammu Kashmir Policy Institute and the chairman of an NGO, Global Youth Foundation, youth-led organization for peace, justice, and religious harmony. I would like to welcome everyone to stage. Finally, I would like to welcome His Excellency Mustafa Usman Turan, the Turkish Foreign Relations Advisor to the Mayor, Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, Turkey. And a former ambassador to Bangladesh of the Turkey. Thank you, everyone. A big round of applause for our guests, please.
Is it working? Great. Yeah. Good afternoon. I know after the launch session, we need more energizer. We need to waking up. But we have esteemed, wonderful panel with us today. They'll definitely come up with great ideas, provocation, and we will try our best to engage as much as we can. Thank you for joining. Thank you, CGS, for hosting this amazing. Thank you, CGS, for hosting this amazing panel. Thank you for joining again. As our host highlighted the importance of today's session, the borders moving, today's conversation, we really like to focus on with a simple question, a truth which is uncomfortable, that the maps are lying us. Not because the cartographers made a mistakes, but because the world they were describing no more exists. Rivers have shifted, coastline have disappeared. An entire village in South Asia are on memories, and the people who live there are moving slowly but relentlessly. Yet the borders on our map remains frozen in time, protected by politics, defended by bureaucracy, and surrounded by fear. So the first provocation to this panel is this: what happens when human movements accelerate faster than political imagination? I repeat, what happens when the human movements faster than the political imagination? Because climate change, conflicts, and hunger are not sudden explosion. They are slow, grinding forces, quietly pushing families to walk further, cross borders, and rebuild their sense of home. And here is the paradox. So migration today is both invisible and increasingly criminalized. Compassion remains stuck behind paperwork. Empathy collapses under the weight of administrative forms. And government debate sovereignty, while families debate survival. So I want to invite all of us to shift the frame. And the question is no longer who belongs where. The real question is, how do we change to define belonging in a world where borders can no longer protect us from global crisis to conflict, climate, and the political chaos? Because climate change does not need a passport, right? Rising sea doesn't stop at the immigration checkpoints. And the hunger does not respect so-called national sovereignty. We are entering an age of moving borders, not because nothing will disappear, but because the foundation once defined belonging, geography, territory, ancestry are eroding. So let me leave the panel with the guiding question to shape our discussion today, and also to all of us in this room. The first guiding question, perhaps, if the climate change or conflict-like forces millions to move, what happens to belonging do we need beyond citizenship and passports? How can compassion move faster than bureaucracy? Most importantly, when protecting border comes at the cost of people, what does leadership looks like? These are not abstract questions, my friend. These are lived realities in our region, from the disappearing river banks of Nepal and Bangladesh, to the sinking homeland of Pacific, to the political movement across Myanmar and Afghanistan. In a world where a map no longer tells the full story, humanity, not geography, must decide who we are. With that, it is my honor to invite all the esteemed panelists today to share their experience around this topic. To begin with, I will take the pleasure of inviting James, as you have experience over your journey of life, moving from many countries to continent, coming from your ancestral roots, like grandfathers, to where you live today in Japan with your children. I would like you to kick off your ideas and experience in relation to what you think mobility means to you.
Well, thank you, Narayan, for a beautiful introduction. Can everybody hear me? Raise your hand. Because this is a story. It's a very important story. In fact, it is the story of human species, of our civilizations. People have been moving since the very first evolution of human beings. And they move to better resources for a more comfortable life, a chance to feed their families primarily, It has driven my family out of Greece, Ireland, and Scotland to the United States, which is the biggest destination in modern times for refugees and immigrants. So I have a story to tell that is based on a new premise, or a substantial premise, called compassion, which is in the title. In the United States now, there is a debate, quite a battle of ideas about immigrants and if they belong in the United States, how did they get there, what are the consequences to the societies that they're integrating in. So we are becoming experts on the migration. My grandfather left a very poor family in Greece when he was 14 years old and managed to get enough money for a boat to New York City, where there's a big statue made in France that said, "Bring us your huddled masses." We are an open land for immigrants. And in those days, that was true. There were several million people in the United States, which is now 320 million. But at the time, there were a lot of land available. The whole idea behind that, which is why I'm here now, is that we were welcomed to a land where we could grow the way we could find, any way we could find. We don't feel that today. And that's an issue not only in the United States, but in many countries. Today I was talking to people from Sweden, from South Africa, from Eastern Europe. They're being besieged by people escaping war, famine in other countries. And I think the key is not how to be angry about this, how they're going to impact our cities, but how can we make this a better life? And I'll start with that, and then we'll go around and field some ideas. But compassion is where I want to start.
Thank you. Thank you for being so brief. I forgot to mention the time, but you were exactly on time. Amazing. Awesome. So let me move on to Professor Kurori, as he comes with his amazing experience being an academic, but at the same time, looking at how the South Asia in a region, but broadly the global perspectives through his academic works, teaching, practicing, and also seeing being a witness of many socio-political academic dialogue in his journey. How do you see when it comes about mobility, the migration, the borders, the demarcations? There were defined once, and today's the way that people move is maybe due to choice or by force. So I will give you. I will maybe want to hear your perspectives, maybe within like 3 to 4 minutes.
Me?
Yeah.
Thank you, Narayan. As and when my research scholars come, I tell them first sentence, precision is an art of scholarship. So Narayan, I try to be precise as much as possible. And the second thing I will do is I will provoke our audience to fire some bullets of ideas and words on me. So we are living in an era in which sense of belongings is greater than the sense of belonging. And under such an era, the problem of border and migration, we should understand. When we talk of borders, there are 3 situations which we are normally using interchangeable: borders, boundaries, and frontiers. And they are not coinciding in most of the societies. Similarly, we are using some concepts like nation, state, and country as interchangeable. again they are not coinciding. But what our system and the governments are doing to make them coincide through policies, through strategies, through laws, and sometimes through coercive measures. And that creates the problem, that creates the conflict, and sometimes it creates the violent conflicts in some of the societies. If we are using coercive measures, so in that respect, when the migration takes place, if you see the migration, in the modern time, there had been two waves of migration. First was the 19th century migration, in which the people from the colonies, by and large, migrated to the colonizer country. And even colonizer country facilitated to migrate people from their colonies to the colonizer country. But over a period of time, it has created some kind of social and economic imbalances in the colonizer countries. At the same time, it has facilitated the national freedom struggle in the colonies. So it has become a serious problem both in colonizer country and the colonial country. So over a period of time, most of the colonies got independence. And when these colonies got independence, the historians have conceptualized and theorized this kind of process as colonial overreach. And this colonial overreach is the kind of demise of colonialism. Then most of the countries reverted from the process of globalization, and they become somewhat protectionist. But the 20th century globalization is more serious, and that was heralded by the United States and other developed countries, of course, in their own interest. And this second wave of globalization was more serious. It has facilitated the migration, not only migration, but movement of goods, services, and people in different parts of the world. If we see the migration since 1990, during last 35 years, it has almost doubled. So now that situation, it has again created, this globalization has created problem in the developed countries which were leading the globalization process. So they are trying to be protectionist. Whereas the developing countries like China and India, they are advocating for the globalization. So under such a situation, should be conceptualized like the historians conceptualize the first stage of globalization, first phase of globalization as colonial overreach. I think we are at the stage of American hegemonic overreach. So American hegemony is disappearing. Under such a situation, how we can have deal with the situation of migration, not only migration, but the movement of people, movement of goods, movement of services, that is necessary for the global south, for the developing countries, for their progress, for their development. So the developing countries, global south is coming forward to advocate the globalization and greater migration, greater mobility. And now the developed countries, including United States, they are becoming protectionist, and it is being reflected in most of the multilateral organizations like G20, what's going on, and how the developed countries are against the BRICS and SCO. So they are trying to contain the migration process. And when US put some restrictions on a B1 visa, the countries like China came forward to give new kind of visa, K visa, to invite the talent from other countries, particularly those who are aspiring to go to developed countries like United States. They are now may go to China or Australia or Germany. These countries are opening their doors. So the mobility and migration will continue. And it is in the interest of humanity. It is in the interest of common prosperity of all the people. But the problem with this migration and the problem with migration and borders is that the borders, the different states are fighting a sort of cartographic conflict, cartographic battle. And that is the different kind of battle. How to deal with these kind of borders problem, that is the serious question we should deal with. Thank you, Narayan.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor. I know you have a lot of perspectives which we can discuss. With the audience, please feel free to make a notes. I'm sure you'll have a lot of good questions. I will come back to Jureda. From where Professor Karori stopped, maybe that's a perfect segue when we think about giving that belongingness, the respect and the dignity of the people moving beyond borders. Right. And you were working as a minister and a very profound politician. Jump in with your experience and the ideas.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, thank you very much, Narayan, and my dear colleagues. So from my experience during the post-COVID, once opens the border, because I was the Minister of Plantation Industries and Commodities, where palm oil is under my care and is our #1 export commodity. So we are very much in need of migrant workers, very much in need. So after the border opened during our post-COVID, I took a trip to Bangladesh and to understand the situation of migration of Bangladesh workers to Malaysia. So to date, we have almost more than 2 million Bangladeshi workers in Malaysia. So much so that those enterprising Bangladeshi, they open up businesses, they cater for the 2 million market, they become richer than any normal Malaysians actually. Okay, anyway, so what happened was, I began to understand the recruitment process that is being done here in Bangladesh. So while I need the plantation workers for the palm oil because of the post-COVID, during COVID they are not allowed to work, and there are a lot of palm oils that is left, not being attended and rotten and the kind of thing, and that's a source of income for the country. So what I understand was the Bangladeshi workers that came to Malaysia, they have to go through quite a number of processes and steps. And most of them coming from the rural areas. They are very naive, they are not educated, and they're also being abused by the recruitment agents, okay? So many levels, from the village head to the district head, whatever, and they were asking them for money. And they had to spend so much money, as much as 30,000 ringgit Malaysian, to pay to come to work to Malaysia. And some of them sell their houses and whatever, But also, I'm also concerned about them when they come over to Malaysia. So, because of their naive nature, so they are very vulnerable actually. So, but sometimes they also be abused in Malaysia, and sometimes of the recruitment on that side also are not ready with jobs to give them. And these people were left desperate. So, when we realized that there's a need for foreign workers for my plantation industries, so therefore we developed an Act 446, because before this, there's no proper housing guidelines, proper amenities guidelines to their living conditions. So with the 446 Act, which we implement during my time, so the procedure is such that they must be given a certain size of room size with proper amenities, toilets, and that kind of thing. And even I'm concerned about their social life. So because every weekend, I said employers should take them out to the city so that they can be mingling with the locals. And but Alhamdulillah, any Bangladeshi that come to Malaysia, they feel at home because they see almost, Malaysians also are like Bangladeshi, and with the food and the lifestyle is all the same. But I'm also worried because they are sometimes being abused by the employers, And I think recently there's about 700 to 800 workers being sent back to Bangladesh with no job and with no pay at all, you see. So these are the things that we have to take care, and we have to take care of these people the way how we take care of our own citizens. So therefore, giving them a proper living condition, a proper living lifestyle, so they have life in our country, is because we are concerned about their welfare, we are concerned about their livelihood and how they move around in Malaysia. So therefore, we come up with this act. So as a minister housing minister in Malaysia, I was concerned by my own citizens who stayed in those small flats, just like the pigeonhole, which I come up with the policy also. They shouldn't build any house smaller than 100 square feet with amenities and so on and so forth. So this is the caring that we show for our fellow migrant workers that come, and they are part of nation building actually. So without them coming to Malaysia, so the plantations and the construction sector and all will not be moving, especially during COVID and post-COVID. And that was really a very devastating period for us, where we are battling with COVID. At the same time, we are trying to battle to bring the migrant workers over to Malaysia. So basically, that's what has happened, especially the migrant workers from Bangladesh. This is the bulk of them in Malaysia. Of course, we have some Indonesians. Earlier, we have Vietnamese, we have Rohingyas. We have a lot of international community in Malaysia. We have Koreans who wants to have Korean street, Korean village, and the Bangladeshi also wish to have Bangladeshi village in Malaysia as well. So they just feel so at home. So they also wanted to have the kind of security or feeling safe in the country.
Thank you. And I'm coming from Nepal, and there's a lot of Nepalese who works in Malaysia.
Also, yeah.
I'm sure they're feeling better. They're feeling more connected with the Malaysians and the global populations. Thank you for doing that work, and kudos to you.
Thank you.
Before I jump into Mustafa, I would like to go to Tasif. As a very young, dynamic political leader, he was also serving as a mayor in Kashmir, Barmulla. So what's your experience like, and what would you like to tell to the audience today? The time is yours. If you could wrap up within 4 minutes, that would be amazing.
Thank you, Narayan. Assalamu alaikum, namaskar, and a
Tasif?
very good
Yeah.
afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
It's fine now? So I want to begin my remarks with a poignant couplet from Kashmiri literate, written by the Shair-e Kashmir, the poet of Kashmir, Ghulam Ahmad Mahjoor Sahib. A line often invoked in conversations about humanity because it captures the very soul of compassion. Shakl chus insan magar, insaniyat nish bekhabar. In appearance, I am a human, but I am unaware of humanity. This verse reminds us that the true measure of humanity is not in how we present ourselves, but in how sincerely we practice compassion in our everyday lives. As some of you in the audience know, I'm a practicing politician too, and I have had the honor of serving as the mayor of Baramulla, Varmul as we fondly call it, one of the historic towns of Jammu and Kashmir. In that role, I have witnessed up close the struggles of those who live on the margins, people with the limited awareness, scarce economic means, and almost no social capital to fall back on. I have seen their challenge, their suffering, and the quiet resilience. And I have also seen how, through dedicated effort, my team and I were able to bring relief, support, and moments of healing to many who had nowhere else to turn. We may not have had abundant resources to offer, but we did what mattered most. We listened. We stood with people in their moments of despair, opened our hearts and minds, and kept our doors open for everyone who needed to talk in and seek answers, support, or even simple reassurance. We could not solve every problem, and we did not always succeed in finding immediate solutions. But what we offered, a compassionate ear, an honest presence, and genuine concern, often brought Healing is ways that policies and programs alone cannot. Baramulla may seem like a small dot on the global map. So why evoke by town at an international forum of this scale? Because as one of my closest friends often reminds me, we cannot solve big problems unless we first understand them. We cannot solve big problems unless the first understand them through the smaller ones. The world today is confronted with crises that test the very ideals of empathy, justice, and dignity. Many of us who still believe in these ideals find ourselves asking, what comes next? How do we heal a world so deeply fractured? The first step is honesty. If people are migrating in unprecedented numbers, we must ask why. If conflict forces them to leave their homes, we must confront the uncomfortable truth of who fuels these conflicts and who benefits from the chaos. If lack of opportunity drives them out, we must question what we collectively have failed to provide in their native lands. Addressing the root cause is not just an ethical duty, it's our shared responsibility as a human beings. Because if we choose instead to shut our borders, deploy brute force, or humiliate those seek refuge, we only deepen the crisis. We cannot defeat human dignity by hardening our hearts or narrowing our worldview. People will continue to seek safety, opportunity, and hope, because that's what the human spirit is here to do. And so, the real choice before us is simple. Either we confront the cause of suffering with compassion and courage, or we continue living in a cycle of fear, force, and failure. Only one of these paths leads the future worthy of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will have a follow-up question, but maybe later. Mustafa, it was great pleasure meeting you, and we had a conversation just before this. As an ambassador, diplomats, you also serve in Bangladesh. What a pleasure to have you here with your long experience, seeing how the mobility, the cross borders works through your diplomatic as well as now what you are doing, working at the mayor's office, supporting administration, as well as maybe seeing seeing what is happening politically. And also, you shared me that how you work while you were in Ankara, supporting UNDP on promoting the refugees or migrants people's livelihoods, dignity, respects. But at the same time, you also mentioned me about how Turkey government is seeing this migration as an asset, not as a risk or not as a threat, but also an asset from the point of humanitarian. And I remember what you said about digital citizenship, right? We're very curious to hear about your journey of witnessing the mobility, migration beyond borders, and your impact in relation to, a digital identity, right? If you want to call that way. So, floor is yours. Again, up to 4 minutes, and we will go for the audience.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be back to Dhaka. I was a Turkish ambassador here for 3 years. I had first-hand experience also how Bangladesh has been dealing with its own refugee and migration-related issues when it comes to Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar. I was there myself many times, witnessing the policies and their effects. I also served in Kosovo in the Balkans, where migration and refugees were also an important issue. So I have some first-hand experience. Before I talk about this belonging and the legal status of migrants and refugees, I would like to actually to make us understand the sort of differences in approaching this really complex issue, I'd like to categorize approaches to migration in two different categories. So one aspect of one approach to migration is actually guided by policies of fear and security. In other words, migration framed as a threat, and containment, deterrence, and border militarization. And these policies include hard borders, detentions and pushbacks, reduced asylum rights, criminalization of irregular entry, political use of migration to mobilize fear, which we see in many parts of the world today. And the other approach is migration policies based on justice and prosperity. In other words, migration framed as human need, both from the perspective of the migrants, but also from the perspective of the receiving societies. So this approach emphasized legal pathways, integration and social inclusion, refugee labor mobility, humanitarian protection, and municipal leadership. Because after all, I also work for Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, and Istanbul is hosting more than 2 million refugees. And I know firsthand that mayors and local leaders are the first responders to the needs of the migrants. So based on these two approaches to migration, of course, there is a hybrid group or a combination of the two policies, a mixed model, in other words, where the countries fall in between the two groups. And Turkey is in this category, actually, because we are hosting large-scale refugees, a large number of refugees. We have strong municipal inclusion, but at the same time, we also have securitization of migration in national politics. So I just want to, in terms of the key message, I would like to talk about this in a way as a moral and political issue rather than a geographic issue. So I would say policies based on fear would protect borders before people, and policies of justice and prosperity would protect people to stabilize societies. So in my experience in Turkey, when I was in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we developed an accelerator to address some of the urgent needs of migrants and refugees in our country, because we need innovative solutions. And we discussed this matter with the migrants and refugees themselves. And the top priority they expressed was the need to be recognized in the societies where they are hosted. So to be recognized, they needed their legal status to be clear. And they are in a way lucky, because Turkey has a law that protects the rights of migrants and refugees. We have a special law, a temporary law, but it provides the right to work, the right to for the refugees to have access to education, their kids to go to school, their access to health services. So that this in a way addresses their need to be recognized. But in many countries, this is not available. So we in our program, the accelerated program, we talked about this with the entrepreneurs, and there was this idea of a digital identity that provided refugees an opportunity to be recognized. Because in most cases they cannot verify their identity or legal status, their education background, or their health records. So it's possible in today's world that if you have a digital identity based on blockchain, you can have tokens to verify various aspects of your identity that allows you to open bank accounts, make money transfers, apply for a job, or go to school, prove your educational background, and keep your health records. So in other words, it's a way to empower people, and this is, of course, a solution based on the approach of justice and prosperity. But at the same time, it provides the tool for the governments to manage migration in an effective way. Because one of the reasons why migration becomes a threat is because politicians sometimes manipulate the fear of the people based on some data that are not totally accurate. So if we have this system where we know exactly the sort of information about the people who are residing in our countries, we can start perceiving them as an asset, as an opportunity to really enrich our shared prosperity, rather than fear, a threat or a fear to be contained. So that's what I wanted to say at this moment in terms of two different approaches to migration.
Thank you. Maybe we will, if you have a time, we will go back to the migration. Of course, thank you for sharing this. But audience, I would like to come back to you. Please raise your hand. Be sure that you be very specific. You can also add some opinion, but the time is limited. The time is energy, time is money, time is trust. So it's very valuable. Just to remind you what the panelists were highlighting, Tosif highlight about the change is not possible overnight, but if you try honestly, that's the first step. And Mustafa, as you mentioned, it's not always about geography, but also a morality and the politics. And James, you highlighted how compassionate and how it is to be connected as a family, right? And getting that social ingredients of trust, cultural values. And the professor highlighted about, the globalization and the order, the 19th century globalization and today's globalization, how they are relating to each other. What is the difference? Is the challenges remains the same or the different? And Jureda beautifully mentioned about while she was actively working on this 446 acts, and her theory was, I also asked her before the panel, was it politically motivated or humanly motivated? And she said humanly motivated. So with that, overview, I would like to come to you, audience. Please feel free to jump in and go to the mic station. And be sure that you share your name and who you belong with. 1 minute, each participant. And if you have time, we will always come back to you. Please move to the microphone. Yes, gentleman here. It would be great if you all want to come to the microphone so that we save our time in advance.
Good evening. This is Mohammad Abdul Hanan FCA. My question is, many people came from Myanmar, called Rohingya, to Bangladesh earlier years. How does Myanmar plan to work with regional partners and international organizations to address the humanities and security concerns that lead to the population movement into Bangladesh. Could you clarify Myanmar official position on the repatriation process of those who have migrated to Bangladesh in recent years? What are the main challenges preventing the return of people who cross into Bangladesh, and how does Myanmar intend to resolve them? Thank you.
Mohammed, would you like to indicate your question to one of the panelists, or you want?
No indications.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, next.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I am Enamul Hassan, a postgraduate student from Islamic University. My first question is, how do moral arguments shape public attitudes towards refugees and asylum seekers today? And my second question is, as the title says, migration, morality, and politics of compassion. Is compassion sustainable as a political principle in managing large-scale migration? And how does the state decide who gets the compassion or who gets the pass to enter a country and who does not? Thank you. Anybody can answer the questions.
Thanks. Can I have another question?
Good evening. I am Maruf Billah Naim. I am second year economics student, department from Jahangirnagar University. So my question is for Mr. Mustafa. As you have experience in Bangladesh and you are a Turkish citizen yourself, so main reason I am directing this question to you is because you have managed the Syrian refugee crisis and Palestinian crisis as well as Nagorno-Karabakh. You have diplomatic muscle flexing all over the world, solving humanitarian issues. So my questions will be, Bangladesh, you know, in Bangladesh Rohingya crisis, there is always lingering, and we as a state, as a country, we are diplomatically unable to solve the problem because there is China, there is India, and there is US interest. So in this scenario, in this environment, we have seen Turkish diplomats moving and muscle flexing very intelligently and very smartly. So my question will be, how, as a state, we Bangladesh build our capacity in terms of military, economic, and diplomatic field so that we, as ourselves, as a nation, solve the problems that are lingering our borders. We see not only in the Chittagong hill tracks, there are Cox's Bazar issues, Chittagong hill track issues, and as you have been in Bangladesh, I am sure you know them very well. So any panelist can answer, but I am specially directing you to, so I hope you will answer them properly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You got an next.
Hello, this is Afsana Mimi and I am from Jahangirnagar University, specialized in international relations. My question is, we are currently living in a more globalized world, but in recent times, both in Europe and America, we are seeing anti-immigrant policies. How do I think these anti-immigrant policies will affect these countries that depend on so much on migrant workers? Thank you.
Thank you. I saw a hand raised from the gentleman with the hat. Would you like to ask a question? Okay, go ahead.
Greetings. My question is similar to
What's your name?
Myself, Ong Thwagyo Marmaong. I'm a student of law at University of Dhaka. Actually, my question is, apart from illegal migration, what are the factors that now most of the developed and Western countries are against on migration? For example, we have observed that recently the newly elected first Prime Minister of Japan, Sanai Takaichi, are against on migration, and we have also observed in America, President Trump administration are against on migration. My question is actually to James, sir. Thank you.
Awesome. I saw, okay, please, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Tanvir Siddiqui. I work for Changemakers, a civic education organization. I do fully agree with Mr. Mustafa, what you said. And my question is to anybody you can, reply. If Mr. Mustafa reply, it's fine for me. The migration in recent phenomenon of migration, I worked with this subject for more than 2 decades. And in recent phenomenon is politicizing the migration issue. Particularly if you see the US recent laws, the UK recent laws, and the European Union and others. And in very particular, the Chega in Portugal, what they are doing, what they are, trying to grab the situation, utilizing the migration issues and others. So the politicizing the migration and getting benefit out of this, what is your observation? Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, sir.
Hello, I'm Anika Tassina. I'm an LLM student at the University of Dhaka. So my question is to Mr. Raina particularly. So we have seen that politicians often frame the issue of migration as security or development issues. But how do you frame it as a political issue? As we have seen that in local communities, people's identity or their representation is being eroded through migration. So does your political organization or leadership take any steps to ensure that representation is not eroded? Thank you.
How about we agree on this? I know I have seen some hand raising, but let's pause a moment because there's a lot of questions and I want to give a justice to my panelists so that they can respond. Since Mustafa, you were indicated at least with 2 persons, why don't you start?
Okay, so I start with the question related to politicization of migration. I think I need to, if I understood well, I need to reframe the question because I think migration issues are political. There is no escape from it. But as I said during my intervention earlier, there's nothing wrong with politicization. But what really matters is how you frame migration in political discourse. Yeah. So I believe framing migration and migrants as individuals as a threat to the security of a given state, that is problematic, I believe. Because, I mean, after all, many of these refugees or migrants, they escape from war or, climate change-related catastrophes or hunger in certain cases in Africa. So they are in a desperate situation, and it's a human condition to seek refuge when you face with a risk to your life. And it can happen to any one of us in this gathering. One day you are a normal citizen, the next day you face with an earthquake, with a natural catastrophe, and you find yourself seeking refuge in another country. So I think we need to develop some level of empathy towards this phenomenon and the people who are affected by it. That's why I think for populist politicians, it's an easy gain to frame migrants as a threat because they can blame others for the problems they cannot solve through different means, through different solutions. So I think that when you talk about politicization of migration, that is the problem, I believe, personally. Because that kind of discourse also underestimates or ignores the contributions made by the migrants. Most of them work in jobs that the local people do not want to work. So they do make a contribution, and in politics, this aspect is usually not emphasized. So regarding the second question, how Turkey sort of developed its policies and especially in terms of diplomacy, how do we sort of deal with the question of migration in a way to, diminish the negative effects in our country. So, you know, one of the problems related to migration internationally is that, you know, when a large number of migrants or refugees are moving into a certain country, like Bangladesh is one of them, the burden sharing by other countries is always a problem. Like, you know, in the beginning, people send humanitarian aid, they do some contributions, other countries, but in time, and in most cases, refugees stay in a country for decades. Like, they don't go away easily. So as time goes by, that burden sharing diminishes, and the hosting countries are, you know, left with their own devices to deal with the needs of the migrants and refugees. So I think that is a serious problem, and in Turkey we do bring this issue up in many international platforms. We emphasize the rights of migrants, we emphasize burden sharing, we emphasize the fact that, you know, excluding migrants or discriminating migrants becomes a real threat. Therefore, I think it's a wiser policy to really try to find a way to integrate the migrants and address their basic needs so that they do not get antagonized. It's in those circumstances they would potentially, you know, be a source of problems rather than solutions. So that's what my country does in general, and it adopted an open door policy towards Syrian migrants. But later on, as I said, we developed policies and practices in time to deal with this issue in an efficient and effective way, so that you know, it doesn't become a problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's one gentleman who asked about the question about why the developed country are so hesitant on responding migrants. So James, would you like to jump in and share your experience?
Yeah, I think the difference that we have experienced in the United States is, can you hear me? The first, we are an immigrant nation, so immigration is the standard way of getting into the United States. And I'm only the second-born American in our family, second generation. My father is a first generation born in the United States. We're all very close to our home countries. And the question for us is not integration, as Mustafa said. For us, it's assimilation. The big difference is you can bring in new settlers into your communities, but unless they assimilate and become one of you, you're going to have a long-term problem. So the problems that we have in immigration in the United States are those who are integrating but not assimilating. Most people who do arrive at the United States are welcomed, and within a very short time, they are very proud to say, I am an American. That's really the secret to this issue. If the Ropongis in Myanmar, 1 million of them that come to Bangladesh, the reaction in the United States would be to say, welcome to become a Bangladeshi. You know, there is a very real assimilation issue. You asked a question about Japan and how it's resisting immigration. And that has been the case since its opening in the 18th century. But the population is declining so fast in Japan, they're now encouraging immigration for the first time. And they're doing it in typical Japanese fashion, very organized, very polite, very compassionate. And so there are some outstanding models of immigration in this world. I think we should all look together for how I don't know how you will solve the Roppongi problem here, but it better start with a real compassion, otherwise it will just lead to conflict. This is my sense.
Sure, thank you. Professor Korori, you previously also touched upon a little bit about there are always a pushing and pulling factors when it talks about people moving. And of course the morality, the compassion, the values, and one of the gentlemen also tried to touch upon this matter. So would you like to share your thoughts, but also responding around the morality and the compassions?
Yeah, I would like to share a couple of sentences. I share the sentiments of my friend from Bangladesh who asked about the repatriation of refugees from Myanmar. And in that respect, I think global community is highly insensitized. What's their level of morality and compassion is there to improve the living, either improve the living conditions of the refugees in Cox's Bazar area and that part of Bangladesh, or their repatriation. So highly inadequate response is there. The second thing which I would like to share is what is the attitude of the host country. Here I think Bangladesh has a positive attitude. And what is the attitude of the origin country? In Myanmar, situation is altogether different. It is an authoritarian regime. So how global community can convince Myanmar for repatriation, that is the challenging question, because two different attitudes are there. The Bangladesh, the host country, and the Myanmar as an origin country, and that difference remains in other parts as well, where migration is taking place, wherever it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a question about politics, and then I'll come to you. Jureda, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I was thinking that there was a question on USA anti-migrant act, right? I mean, they are pushing for that. But I think it will not affect Bangladesh in that sense because it is their policy for their country where they are stopping Mexicans and from coming into US. But I think it will not affect a country like Bangladesh. But for Malaysia, we do not ratify the Refugees Act, So, but we allow Myanmar to come in to the country, but of course there's limitations. They are not allowed to work. They are not allowed to go to work, but they are quite quite freely staying in Malaysia. They have their own community and that kind of thing. But probably Malaysia is still underpopulated, so we can still take in these refugees, you see, even though we don't ratify the law, the act, yeah. But probably Bangladesh is quite overpopulated in that sense with 180 million people and is still growing. So I think is a country policy has to look into that. Because I think like Syrian refugee in Germany, for instance, they have these orientation programs and that kind of thing so that it will not influence the social fiber of the country and do not bring down the quality of life of the country so that they know the do's and don'ts of the country. So I think it's up to the host country as what they want to do, and they can impose on the policy. But for Myanmar refugees, we have the global understanding where countries like Malaysia is a Muslim country, Indonesia is a Muslim country, so they are given space in these countries actually.
Yeah, thank you. But I would also like to go to Toshi before I move to, I'm looking at you, but just a minute. Toshi, you as a young politician, you always aspire for change and took that courage and that brevity, that honesty to be in the positions and the power. What do you think when it comes about, for example, India as the largest democracy in the world should engage young people in shaping the future of the future of the nation?
Can you repeat again that?
Yeah. So the question around how young people can shape the decisions when it comes about India engaging their populations
Young.
in this? Yeah.
We are a young nation, and the youth have a huge responsibility to shape our country's future. That's why you are seeing so many young men and women jumping into politics as a career across India, and honestly, they are doing exceptionally well. Take, for example, Abhishek Banerjee in West Bengal, Aditya Thackeray in Maharashtra, Raghav Chadha in Delhi, and Chirag Paswan in Bihar. These are some of the young leaders I genuinely see as a hope on the horizon. The same thing is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. Political parties are actively backing young leaders to step up and represent the people. We now have many elected MLAs under 30 and under 40 in our assembly, including several impressive women. Even at the grassroots level in municipalities and panchayat, countless young people have contested elections, won and delivered extraordinary results. It's inspiring to watch the new generation taking charge. And one is in front of you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great. So with the interest of the time, I will let you ask your question, but with the question, if you could also propose some solution. And after this, I will invite another maximum 3 people. If you come up with the solution, right? Solution of the problems that we discussed, the issue that raised. Sir, please go ahead. Microphone, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to draw our neighboring country, Indian veteran, Professor Karuri. Recently, we observed from the Indian government, they lead some pushing to Bangladesh, some people who are the really citizen of India. But unfortunately, Indian government with the compassion, the opposite of political compassion, they actually try to push people to Bangladesh. What is your opinion about such kind of pushing that are out of international law, humanitarian, out of violation of humanitarian approach, and also the violation of neighboring friendship? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone would like to propose some solutions? Okay, Professor Karuri.
Hello. I don't think the government of India is pushing Bangladeshis out of India. It's the internal matter to revise the voting list, that the SIR. That is something different. It's not the pushing people out of India. So that is the different exercise, SIR, just to maintain the citizenship register. That exercise is taking place. And that is the internal matter of India. In a democratic system, those who are not citizens of India, they should not have voting right. For that, this exercise is taking place. But sometimes media is reporting something out of the context. So the government's policy and administrative decision is different from what the media is sensationalizing sometimes. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we are about to close our session, but I would allow our panelists, if you have an idea, please propose one solution that you think is most practical and the need of the hours. I will start with Jureda.
Yeah, I think in relation to, because I don't have much of a problem with this, and because we are very much involved with migrant workers in Malaysia. So other than that, I think we are very dependable on the migrant workers. So therefore, we have to take care of their welfare properly, so in order for them to stay on and to do the job that the Malaysians don't want to do the job, you see. But they were very handy also in the country, so odd jobs and whatever, and they're quite well trained in terms of technical jobs and so on and so forth. So I think for future, Bangladesh will benefit when you have your new government, you're going to have transform your country, you will need these semi-skilled workers that has been trained in Malaysia to come back to your country and serve you. So we have done the job for you to train them, and please bring them back as talent corp to help to progress in your development later. Thank you.
Awesome. Can I move it to the Karuri, sir?
About which?
A solution?
Solution.
Which one? What question?
If you could share one solution of the problem.
Solution of which
Yeah,
problem?
what's your solutions look like?
Solution to the migrant.
How you solution to the migration issue?
Of the migrant workers.
Myanmar migrants.
Whatever.
Whatever.
Migration.
You see, the global community should come forward for resolving the issues of at least refugees. Migrant issue is different from the refugee issues. And in case of Myanmar migrants as refugees in Bangladesh, I think Bangladesh is taking it as a humanitarian issue, not as a burden. Bangladesh on its own is doing marvelous job. But global community, even government of Bangladesh approached the global community, including United Nations, but they are not having proper response, adequate response. That is the challenging question. As regards the legal migration, the developed countries, they are considering that migrants are creating social imbalance in their societies. So they are becoming protectionist, and the US attitude is somewhat different. No less than the Vice President of United States told the migrants, particularly the labor migration in United States, American companies should not invite the labor. If they invite the labor to United States, then it will hurt the innovation and invention. So American companies refrain from taking labor force from different parts of the world. So this is the attitude of the developed countries. How it is appropriate, because the technological advancement, the technological innovation and invention is not in an end itself. There must be some humanitarian consideration. Technology is an instrument, but labor replacing technology, it's creating imbalance in the developed countries as well as in the developing countries. That is the big challenge. How to deal with it, that is, we shall have to think over it.
Thank you. James?
I think he's exactly right. It's an attitude for the developed countries because they have their basic needs satisfied. So they have the luxury of making choices about people and about inviting others to join in. And that's something for all of us to aspire to. And I'll just make one other final comment. On the news, you can see where the police in the United States are grabbing immigrants and they're arresting them and they're deporting them. That is an aberration. There are cases of this going on, and we, American people, are very upset at this. And we will probably change our government as a result. And that's the other option in a democracy. If you don't like what's going on, you can elect somebody else. That's what we're about to do.
Thank you so much, Mr.
The most intolerant people towards refugees and migrants are the ones who have never encountered any migrant or refugee. So my solution is for local governments or national governments to create programs and projects in which local communities meet with the migrants and refugees. And they discuss, they do projects together. Maybe, it can be even a sports program. It can be a cultural program. Just to get to know each other so that they feel their shared humanity, right? And you know, when I visited refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, my understanding of the you know, the challenges of these people became much more compassionate. So I would recommend both decision makers and citizens to get to know each other.
Thank you so much. Tashif, would you like to propose a solution?
So I believe it's the responsibility of major powers and global leaders to approach migration through dialogue and cooperation. Only sustained constructive engagement can lead to a long-term solution.
Awesome. I think you conclude the session. We need a constructive engagement. I would like to ask our host if we have a time. Otherwise, I have seen wrap up, right? Okay. Unfortunately, I invited few of you if you have any proposed solution, but don't worry. Please post your solution on Bay of Bengal conversation, social media, and you email, and later we can have a conversation over tea, coffee. But thank you for being so generous, audience, listening, engaging, asking questions, and thank you, amazing panelists. I think they deserve a round of applause. Thank you, guys. Everybody deserves it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you especially to the panelists for a very engaging session. I would like to invite all of the panelists to come in front of the stage to take a photo. And as the moderator, Mr. Narayan said, this conversation actually continues beyond the panels and the sessions. You can over the tea and the coffee, or you can discuss solutions. And the conversation is not just about the panels and not just about the sessions, it continues beyond that. And the next one, it's a big one. I hope you guys are held on tight to your seats, and I'm gonna give it over to my colleague Fahim after they're done taking the picture.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is our moment of the conversation. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Shamsul Arif Fahim. This is our moment of the conversation to lean into the fault line of global power. As money turns into a new battlefield and sovereignty gets rewritten in courts. Now, I'd like to invite our distinguished speaker to the stage as we dive into the politics of money, sanctions, sovereignty, and the new economic Iron Curtain. Please welcome His Excellency Boris Tadic, former President of Serbia. Mr. Peter Occam, entrepreneur, Rigilok AG, Ocean Safe AG, King's Rock Advisor, Good Carbon. Mr. Mohammad Parvez Imad, Senior Consultant and Advisor. Mr. Sheikh Mohammad Daniel, Director, Sonali Life Insurance. Mr. Anarul Alam Choudhury, President, BCI. And guiding the conversation, our moderator, Mrs. Arya Nijat, co-founder and policy lead at iTicker. Please give a round of applause for the speaker and moderator.
এখানে তো সরি
Are we ready? Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Well, very good afternoon to you. My name is Arya Najat, and I will be moderating this plenary session. Before we start the session, I want to congratulate the CGS team for enabling this opportunity for exchange of ideas, for learning, and for open dialogue, which I think is a true reflection of CGS's commitment to democratic debate. And I also want to thank you for extending this kind invitation to me. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this plenary session, which focuses on the politics of money, sanctions, sovereignty, and the new economic Iron Curtain. I think this session is offering us an opportunity to look at a part of the geopolitics that's often invisible, but it's incredibly powerful, and that's the financial system itself. We usually think about geopolitics in terms of armies, alliances, or borders, but increasingly the reality is that geopolitics and global power runs through payment systems, through reserve currencies, credit access, and the digital pathways that'll help keep the money flowing around the world. We're also meeting at a time when countries like Bangladesh are integrating with global supply chains, global compliance systems, and global markets. And because of that, this conversation is more relevant than before, because exclusion from the global financial network can shrink a country's strategic space as much as other traditional forms of pressure can. And across the world, due to these disruptions, we see that the system is shifting. While some nations are doubling down on the traditional methods of payment and finance, others are looking into alternatives, alternative payment systems, local currency arrangements, or digital settlement systems, all in an effort to gain a little bit more breathing room. And so today, our task in this session is to look back, zoom out a little bit, and look at the system itself. And we will do that through three rounds. In the first round, we will look at the system. We will look at how the financial system is reshaping sovereignty. In the second round, we will look at how sanctions are splitting the countries into competing economic blocs. And in the third, in terms of way forward, we will look at what options countries, industries, and firms have in the midst of this system reshift. To help us understand these questions, we have an exceptional panel. They come from public policy, industry, finance, entrepreneurship, and risk management. And each of them bring a different vantage point to this conversation, so I really hope that you'll find it valuable. I will briefly introduce the panelists. We have with us Mr. Anwarul Alam Chaudhary, who is a leading industrialist and the president of the Bangladesh Chamber of Industries. He brings deep insights into industrial competitiveness and export resilience. We next have with us President Boris Tadic, who is the former president of Serbia. He has also served as Minister of Defense and Minister of Telecom in a few other roles which are very interesting, a teacher, a journalist, and a clinical psychologist. He's known for steering his country through complex times and advancing its Europe integration agenda. And by virtue of these roles, he brings deep insights on statecraft, strategic negotiations, and managing the political economy of sanctions. He's currently serving as advisor to the CEO of VEON, which is a telecom player with considerable global footprint. We next have Dr. Muhammad Parvez Imdad, who is a seasoned economist and policy advisor with extensive experience in government and multilateral development institutions. His work covers country programming, regional cooperation, governance, and development financing. We next have Peter Okamp, who is an entrepreneur and strategy leader with a background in investment banking and sustainable industries. He serves on many roles currently, so I don't know how he juggles that. He serves on many senior roles with companies operating in climate and nature investment, sustainable material innovation, and global financial advisory. And last but not the least, to my very right is Sheikh Mohammed Danial, the director of Sonali Life Insurance and a business leader in the garment sector in Bangladesh. And he is known for championing digital innovation and financial inclusion in Bangladesh's private sector. To open the conversation, I want us to begin at the system level. And my question to all the panelists, and I will start with President Tadic, is, are we entering an era where sovereignty is negotiated through financial system rather than diplomacy? And what does that mean for countries positioned between major geopolitical currents? I'm hoping that President Tadic will, given his experience of negotiating between major geopolitical blocs, will respond to this, having witnessed the financial pressures that sanctions create on countries.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. My suggestion to organizers is to put one speaker from here in front of us, because we don't have a good opportunities to hear what you're telling us right now because of rumors in this room. Anyway, the second, the sanctions are existing after Second World War, and when the financial system we are living in was established. Bretton Woods, famous meeting, that was almost at the end, before the end of the Second World War, in order to prevent any financial problems and economic crises that can affect the world after war. But in fact, that system has been functioning as an instrument in the hands of the main financial powers, United States and other Western countries until nowadays. And my country, as Serbia, was under sanctions during the 1990s war in the former Yugoslavia. And just before having this panel, we talked about that. I was explaining that even though the countries and the politicians that has been imposing sanctions on Serbia in that moment, expecting that we are going to have a more fragmented society, and that they expected that our leaders in that time are going to lose supports of the ordinary people. Reaction of ordinary people was totally different. They were more coherent, more supported the president of Serbia, Milosevic, in that moment. And whoever is thinking that sanctions are going to make more fragmentations within every single society, I think it's a failing. Nowadays, we are talking about famous sanctions against Russia, and this is also one moment which is showing really naive of the Western world, expecting that Russia is going to be weaker and not that coherent society. I think that the situation in Russia is going to be totally opposed to that expectations. But this is only instrument, a financial instrument, on which the Western countries are counting for a few decades, and I think that also innovations in that respect can be very helpful right now, if we want really to have a kind of instrument to solve problems, especially conflicts we are facing with all together, for example, in the war in Ukraine. If you're talking about sovereignty, this is very fragile issue and the very specific phenomena. Sovereignty is based on financial system of every single country, but because of Bretton Woods rules, we are not living in a real world where sovereignty is possible. We are living in an interconnected world, and with the system of IMF, World Bank, SWIFTs, and the way of paying our bills, we cannot count on real sovereignty. Countries today can count on some measures that can defend themselves in the world in which we are living, but not very efficient measures. Many people are thinking that cryptocurrency can be kind of tool that some sovereign country can use in order to provide a better financial system, more solid and more stable. But cryptocurrency is also a very fragile system, and that cannot be foundation of such measures, and I'm not sure this is possible. Because we are facing with a kind of domination of the United States and other Western countries that are following the financial agenda, we have outcome which is BRICS countries, and the BRICS countries are trying to replace the dollar as a currency, global currency, but we'll see what is going to be final outcome of the BRICS model and BRICS projects. But all in all, even though we are living in the world which was under domination of United States and the countries that have been following US dollar agenda, I think that living on the crossroad of the two different political models and geopolitical models, we can expect some crucial and substantial changes. But I'm not sure that even though this is crystal clear that we can expect some crucial changes, someone can predict which kind of changes we are going to be faced with in the future. And this is one of the most interesting dilemma and the questions nowadays, because that fact, how new architecture of financial world is going to be formed, is crucially important for the future of the world. We'll see. I'm very much curious to see what is going to be final outcome of that critical moment in the history of the mankind. But this is some of the most important questions regarding new architecture and new world orders.
Thank you, President Tadic. Dr. Imdad, if I can come next to you, and please feel free to react to what the President said, particularly in terms of sovereignty being fragile in the domination of the US dollar, and that there are changes coming, but there are uncertainties associated there. What, for countries that, given your economy background and your decades of experience as an economist, for countries that heavily rely on external financing, what happens to their policy autonomy in this environment?
Thank you, Arya, and members, my colleagues, the members of the panel, and guests. Thank you very much. Well, first thing I'd like to say is that after the Second World War, when decolonization started, the process of flow of economic assistance engineered an impact of support from resource-based countries to newly independent countries that were decolonized. There starts the point, that's the point of the flow, process of flow of capital. Capital to support development, social and economic development. So that trend continued, and then we find that the political authority was an integral part, has come in to influence the flow of money. Even in terms of economic assistance, the question of political closeness, proximity, or being in the same alliance, or being in the same stream of social and economic as well as international policy dimensions, the unanimity of views was a factor for getting more assistance. Till then, sanctions was not seen as a very important element. After the Cold War, when the Cold War was on, sanctions started to be seen visibly in some cases. But after the Cold War, when the Cold War was gradually diminishing or reducing, we find sanctions becoming a sort of, not common, but sometimes used in case of relations between developed and developing nations. In response to your question and the points made by our distinguished guest, I feel sanction may have impact, but its adverse impact stems from diversity of factors. What is the nature of the sanction? Its scope and magnitude, and it's based on what? Now, it has its own stages, focus, and its own dimensions. That is, the object is to punish or to get some sort of agreement to which someone has not agreed to. And having said that, there are ways of, we haven't seen sanctions used rather only for monetary or fiscal, in monetary and fiscal dimensions. But the impact on the countries is visibly, the impact is very severe to those countries who face sanctions. So in that case, I think what the countries could do to face such situations is to strengthen their own economies and to generate economic surveillance, which is more easier now, monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. I'll just humbly share my own experience during the Asian financial crisis in 1997. I was working in the Asian Development Bank. The major international organizations had a huge difference of opinion. That was not sanctioned per se, but that was a financial crisis, but I'm just comparing it, though it's not fully comparable. And for quite some years, Malaysia, Singapore, and most other countries of the Indonesia, mainly Malaysia and Singapore, who were middle-income countries, I mean, they were without any assistance from the key international development, partners. But they went for quick economic surveillance mechanism within themselves to cushion external shocks. At the same time, they generated financial strength within their own economies. But that was not sanctioned. What I'm trying to say is that if we go back again, James Keynes, during the Great Depression of the 1930s, he said after the Second World War, the general theory of employment, interest, and money is only to guard against the impact of the Great Depression. But a time may come when countries may face serious fiscal deficits due to relations with other countries, how to manage their own affairs with other countries who matter to them in terms of flow of resources. So the question here is that countries should be internally strong, have strong macroeconomic indicators, should have and build up economic and financial resilience. Even without sanctions, these are necessary conditions for inclusive development. So, and another important factor that the country should make, those who face sanctions should make a risk assessment or mitigation impact, how to mitigate risks. The thing that most countries may take time, those who face sanctions, is to strengthen informal sectors that do not have much bearing through the sanctions. Then you have an alternative stream of economic activity that will generate support to the overall stream of development financing. I'll stop at that at this moment. But if you have anything further to ask.
Thank you, Dr. Imdad. These are interesting points. You highlight that it's important to look at the nature, scope, magnitude, and purpose of sanctions. In that, in a nutshell, the way forward should focus on building internal resilience, economic resilience, in order to have more maneuvering power. Chaudhry Sahab, if I can come to you, since Dr. Imdad just talked about building internal resilience, you are a leading industrialist and the president of the Bangladesh Chamber of Industries. You interact with private sector in Bangladesh on a daily basis. What does this shift look like from your point of view, from the vantage point of view of Bangladesh's export-dependent industries?
So thank you. Everything is talk about the sanction. What gonna be consequences? It been happened before, and what gonna be happen today, especially a country like Bangladesh. See, the sanctions, let's put it this way, that is against whom and for what? This is a economic power game. It's between the China and the America. And then it been the way Mr. Trump have taken it up, that he have gone with a tariff, by using the tariff, reverse back to the WTO system, which was giving a protections to the developing nations, And now what we're gonna be see is that the individual country is going to be negotiate each other who have the interest and benefit will be getting a benefit out of it. Like Europe, for example. India is now doing the FTA with Europe. Vietnam is doing the FTA with Europe, with a UK, And this kind of things is happening very fast. And Europe is also, UK is already had a FTA to the India, and they are trying to take the benefit, both the side, they are seeing their economical benefit. And with the Trumps, there is another things because they are fighting with the China, and because of the China, he has given a de-risking supply chain because high tariff makes the China to take a shape on their own economy structure. So he goes back with a resources like AI or the cobalt, all those things. He's not trying to increase it and giving an impose over there so that America is having a problem over there. And now the Americans are trying to give a sanctions with their Russia-Ukraine war because of the Russian-Ukraine war and the the oil sanctions. And the third country cannot use this oil from the Russia. So you see, these are all the big power game. And the country like Bangladesh, who are actually, you can say, just a developing nation. From the LDC to we are graduating gradually with the middle income group. For them, it has not been touched in a sense that Bangladesh economy is totally based on RMG sector, and which is totally with a Western and US base. So, with the US tariff, yes, it's been affected to us also, but we are so far, we are at a par because with our competitor country. But now when we can see that Thailand is getting a zero tariff because America has an interest with the Thailand, what shall I say, the cobalt, and Thailand, Malaysia is also getting a zero tariff. So that Vietnam is still with us. So there is we can see that block is coming up gradually. The block as such is what? Block is, we can see the block about China, then the Iran, then the Russia one block, plus some others. On the other hand, Europe, America is one block. So Bangladesh is in this position. Bangladesh business people, they are now trying to see that so far we are not being touched, but we have to take our preparations that with it's an opportunity for Bangladesh in a sense. Because of de-risking, the supply chain has been shifting from China to anywhere else. Bangladesh could have taken this opportunity to grab the Chinese investment in Bangladesh or from the other countries' investment, because the Bangladesh having a labor-intensive, or you can say we are 180 million people, and labor-intensive industry is very much viable over here. And Bangladesh is so far got stuck with a three sector. One is the remittance, one is agricultural industry, and then the RMG sector. RMG so far is not been affected, but RMG, they are trying to take a shape in order to extend their market in a different region, but the growth will be not that much, I think, maybe 5–10%. But we have another headache is the employment. So automation of the agriculture sector, if we don't do it, agriculture so far is doing pretty good, but we have to address with the automation in the agriculture sector. And then we have to find out our another fourth pillar of economy, and that is a engineering sector, light engineering sector. So we have to have now move forward, and we have to address how to develop the skilled manpower so that the light engineering industry we can go, which ultimately will give a opportunity for the Chinese to shift their industry in Bangladesh or India to shift the industry in Bangladesh, And Bangladesh would be able to take this benefit. So far, as I say, that we don't have been affected that much because we are totally dependent on as far as the export is concerned with the US and the Europe. But for the future, I think that we have to be concerned about to explore our market, more growth to the China or India. So during that time, maybe our currency will also be affected. So far it has not been affected. But in order to this, what shall I say, the sanctions problem occurring, you know, we have to prepare ourselves because our biggest import partner is the China and the India. So the Chinese yuan or the Indian currency, you know, we can try to be exchanged when we do the trading with them instead of using our dollar. But for the future, I think that Bangladesh is in such a position, or the mentality of the entrepreneur in this country as such, that it's a resilient nation, you know, and we can able to find out. But provided we need a government policy support. Unfortunately, the time what is happening globally right now, we are having a big earthquake in our country. That is our political shock because of the interim government is here. They cannot take any decisions with the policies as far as the policy is concerned. But the entrepreneurs is waiting now that when the political government will come, maybe we can try to work it out and how to face in the coming days as the crisis is happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaudhry Saab. That's a very practical and forward-looking approach, particularly insisting on the need to diversify in terms of access to supply chains and markets. Peter, if I can come next to you, you work across sustainability and financial investment sector. How tangible the impact of this economic iron curtain you think is in terms of the operational realities of the private sector in the sectors that you focus on?
I think for individual countries, this can be, individual companies, this can be quite a question of life and death. But I think at an aggregate level, and I think for all these companies as well, they will find ways around, probably faster than sovereigns or nation states can, right? And I mean, if I may add to what the previous speaker said, is that, you know, sanctions, it's always a question of what type of sanctions and who is supporting them. And if you look at the financial system, then I believe we are now in the last days of a unipolar financial world, right? And so therefore sanctions become much less and less effective. And as President Tadic and Professor Imdad said, I mean, you just need to look at Russia, right? And how the heavy sanctions imposed by the West have affected the economy, right? I mean, one fact I was looking up is 2019, before the invasion, Russia was pumping a little bit more than 11 million barrels of oil per day. In 2024, they were still pumping more than 10 million barrels of oil per day. So that's a reduction of less than 10%. And that's less a result of sanctions, but much more so because OPEC had agreed an 8% cut in 2023. So basically, there was a negligible effect of the sanctions. And then on the other hand, you know, sanctions rely on a network effect. And so if not everyone supports the sanctions, that means they become much less effective. And so nowadays, it's not necessarily that people are recipients, that you have a coalition of sanctionees, but in this case, you have a sanctionee and a number of non-aligned states. And the number of non-aligned states is very large. And if you look at the most prominent and most active trading counterparties with Russia these days, it's also a very unlikely alliance of non-aligned states. I mean, this consists of China, India, Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Israel as the, you know, who are the largest trading partners now for Russian oil. And you would normally not find them at a strategically aligned table as a group. Right? So I think what you'd sometimes have from these sanctions are unintended consequences. And these unintended consequences are that you build up competitive systems and therefore probably accelerate the end of a unipolar financial system.
Thank you, Peter. this is an interesting intervention in the sense that sanctions lead to unintended consequences, which defeat the original purpose for which the sanctions were actually imposed. Chaudhry Saab had a very positive approach when he talked about how Bangladesh's private sector is dealing with the disruptions in the financial global system. From your perspective, as a young leader in the Bangladeshi private sector, working in the garment industry and the insurance industry, and I'm sure there are plenty others, from your point of view, how politicized has the monetary environment become, and how does that affect the work of the companies that you interact with?
Right, so thank you very much. I really liked what Chaudhry Saab had said, or who I fondly refer to as Parvez Uncle, and I would like to take this opportunity to wish him happy birthday because it's his birthday today. He's a...
Shall we sing?
Yeah. So he's a legend of the industry. We've always looked up to him. He's been very close and dear friend to my late father-in-law, who always supported me and who would have been here if he was alive today. But to the question of how do we deal with this fallout of financial risk across industries, stemming out of whether it is tariffs or sanctions. Now, one of the industries in Bangladesh, or I would say rather one particular industry in Bangladesh, was the energy sector that got affected. Because of the sanctions, the tariffs, the piling effects of all of it, our first and only nuclear power plant in Bangladesh at the Rupur power station, now that was developed by the Russians, and they got sanctioned. Now, you still have to honor the commitments because it's a G2G project. But they didn't know how to make those payments. So the government actually literally had to take extreme measures in order to make sure that the project gets finished and the Russians get paid. But in doing so, it indirectly depleted a lot of its foreign reserves, which created a very volatile market for import-based businesses as well as for export-based businesses, and which has created another parallel issue about the value of the currency. So once the value of the currency erodes, the purchasing power of the country erodes along with it. And we have seen the knock-on effect of that in terms of inflation. And that inflation ultimately increases the wage rate of the workers, and which directly impacts into our floors, factory floors. So I always have this belief that when it comes to policy making on a global stage, on a geopolitical stage, the foreign affairs offices in Bangladesh get to know about it much later. But at the factory floors, we know it much earlier. We feel the effect of it. It affects us, it affects our prices, it affects the way we deal. You know, for the last 40 years, or a bit longer than that, the garments industry in Bangladesh shaped the industrial landscape in Bangladesh. What we have learned throughout this entire period is that there's a global order, and it is global village. And you go out into the world and you try and find the best price for the best product and the best services so that you can assemble the best product for your factory, for your buyer. Now, we are not natural manufacturers. We're not supposed to be garments manufacturers. We don't produce cotton. We're supposed to be fishermen. My father always says, you know, if things would have gone the other way, you would have been a fisherman. So be lucky with what you have in life. And that's true. I would have made a very bad fisherman because I don't like fish. But nonetheless, we're very lucky because of the ingenuity, because of the perseverance of our people, of our previous generations. You know, my grandfather, for him, the battlefield was on the factory floor, getting the machines, getting the raw material, and getting the people to work. For my father, the battlefield was access to market, with the quotas, with getting the right sort of advantages. But for my generation, it's all about algorithms now. At the end of the day, who's the last consumer, and how do I get the product delivered? How do I get my payments across the ocean, across the pond? Now, what wonderfully he has explained Mr. Thiel had explained about the unintended consequences. One of the unintended consequences was India becoming a partner to Russia as well as to China in all of this. Very unlikely. But India still has that capacity to form alliances. But a country like Bangladesh, we are too small of an economy, too small of a nation, not in terms of population, but at least in terms of density, in terms of the landmass, to actually form proper alliances. And if we had alliances, we could have protected ourselves and we would have been able to develop. Now, if you look at the richest economies in the world, whether it's the US or the European market, they formed that sort of a alliance in order to protect themselves from global shocks. And most of these shocks originate from themselves, but they are well protected. But a country like Bangladesh, or a country like Vietnam, a country like Cambodia, these economies, they need to come together in a pack in order to sustain the global shocks. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened because there's not enough political will. Perhaps there's not enough global understanding of economics in the country. But we hope that in the coming future that will change. And one must really thank the organizers of CGS of putting up a platform like this where such discussions can happen and future can be developed. And one more thing before I end, I must thank the organizer for another thing, for having the courage of doing this. Because there was a time not too long ago when the state machinery was really after the organizers. I don't know if they're here, some of them might be here, but they were after them for basically discussing these very topics in order to take the country forward. If you don't have critical thinking, if you don't have discussions where you discuss the future possibilities and the threats that your economy faces, then you don't develop. And that's where that rut is where Bangladesh was, and hopefully in the future we will get out of it.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I completely concur that CGS does deserve a round of applause for this conference and for the previous years, and for the amount of coordination and dedication that goes into putting all of this together. You had a very people-centered response. You talked about factory floors, you talked about wages, and you talked about just at the end, what is all this about, if not for the well-being of the people? And what Peter said also about unintended consequences, that's a kind of a good segue into our second round, which focuses on unintended consequences. And Peter, I want to give you the opportunity first, if you want to add to the already discussed unintended consequence, if you want to add any additional ones, because there is a growing debate about the era of over-sanctioning and whether it's being overdone, sanctions and counter-sanctions, and they just continue until one of the powers would back off. In addition to what you discussed, particularly from the private sector point of view, what else could be on the unintended consequences of the over-sanctioning that we may be entering?
Yes, absolutely. No, that's very interesting. I think in terms of over-sanctioning, what we are seeing and the acceleration towards a less unipolar world in finance is also that these non-aligned groups of nation states, they come together and kind of build competitive systems. And instead of punishing one country, you end up building up a competitor. And if you look at it in this term, then it's more about the short-term switching cost that are painful. So while you go through a transition, while you move away from a dollar clearing system to another system or whatever type of system you want, but it's initially about building the infrastructure to build more resilience. And in the long term, once the infrastructure is built and the hardware is in place, the software of sanctions and of penalties becomes much less threatening, right? Because you can play on different fields. And I think that also might be a great opportunity for a country like Bangladesh. As a smaller, medium-sized economy, Bangladesh would never be perceived as a threat or of building up its own block in the world order. And I mean, for your industry, probably the markets in the US and the European Union are the most important. And if you look at industrialists or companies in the private sector in these markets, they look for supply chains that are different from those supply chains of the past. In the past, it was all about efficiency, just in time, right? As efficient as possible. And now it's going more into an area of where you have just in case. You don't want to be reliant on a supply chain in China because something could happen tomorrow. You don't want to be reliant on a supply chain for commodities from Russia because just in case. And I think Bangladesh is perfectly positioned to become one of these just in case places because it's non-threatening. And therefore it will always be there as a reliable partner, potentially. So I think that might be a very, very interesting perspective in this time, right? And I think, the switching costs to kind of highlight that with the fact, there are different countries in Latin America who face similar situations. For example, Brazil, 2018, 84% of the internet traffic of Brazil was routed through servers in the United States. This share of internet traffic has come down much further and further, and now infrastructure is being built with direct cable links between Brazil and the European Union, with Brazil and Africa, and then Africa is being linked up with India, and therefore, while this is an expensive infrastructure investment, this will provide independence and more sovereign powers to these countries in the longer term.
Thank you, Peter. I'm also looking at the time we have in this round. Particularly, I want to give the opportunity to, maybe I'll first go to President Tadic to briefly hear from him, based on his experience running a whole country. Are there any blind spots that governments face when trying to manage such pressures? In the face of, for instance, Daniel talked about how difficult it became to honor a G2G commitment. What, in your opinion, are blind spots that governments may face while trying to manage the political economic dynamics of sanctions?
This depends on the regime, which is existing in some countries. If this is democratic regime, this is a different reaction. If this is dictatorship, again, the very different reaction. But the main issue for every regime is how to keep coherent society and how to avoid the distortion and the many protests and very bad outcome of the sanctions. But all in all, I think that a reaction of ordinary people and all governments are counting on them is going to be to support the ruling party and the government in the moments of sanctions. What the countries that are imposing sanctions are expecting, this is totally opposed. Because people are behaving, this is a normal reaction, in a dangerous situation in the same way. They are more coherent, they're trying to defend themselves, and they consider their government as a pillar of their security in that moment. Regarding sanctions in Russia, I think that the Western countries are totally failing. Totally failing. They think that Russian citizens are going to withdraw their support to the Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. And I think the situation is totally different, totally on the other side. But maybe if sanctions are going to be sustainable and in the long term can have a kind of impact of behavior of society, those sanctions can have an impact on economic situation. But this is something very different from the behavior of society and reaction of society. You can have a weaker country, weaker economy, weaker living standard, but also people can behave in a totally different way. They can be more coherent and more supportive for the current regime. And this is about psychology in politics. And if I may say, as a psychologist, the reaction of ordinary people is very controversial in political field. We are expecting the people are behaving in a rational way. If we are economists, if we are coming from economical sector, and we are expecting that people are going to think about how much they are going to earn this month, and what about their income and something like that. But psychological behavior in politics is very rational, much more emotional than rational. And this is why I'm suggesting to the political leaders that are counting on sanctions to have a different option. And they are totally failing. And this is why, in the beginning of the war in Ukraine, I'm totally against the Russian intervention and the war in Ukraine. But I'm also totally against sanctions, because we have to understand what is going to be final impact of those sanctions. Russian society is not going to feel that the Western world was treating them in the fair way. They have their own problems and their own reasons why they consider Ukraine as a potential enemy. In the long term, if we are adding sanctions to that, and specific treatment from the Western medias, the Western world is pushing Russia far away. And this is extremely dangerous in the interest of the Western world. Because if you consider some country enemy,
I think your microphone is...
Yeah. So while we're fixing the mic, I think one of the takeaways that at least I have personally is that all governments should have expert clinical psychologists on their policy teams, because we're dealing not just with consequences in the economy, but also how to...
No, everything is, I mean, we are living in a interconnected world, and economies depend on psychology of emotions of rational attitude. But if you are putting some country and the citizens of this country under sanctions, if you are considering them as an enemy, if you are treating them in the media and international media as an enemy, you are pushing them far away from you. If the Western world is pushing far away from themselves Russia is going to be a more dangerous country in the future. The strategy to put enemy far away from you is a very bad strategy. With your enemy, you have to have a closest relations. If your enemies are far away from you, your enemy can be very dangerous. Your enemy is not counting on how you are going to react if that enemy is going to attack on you. If enemies are closer to you, all impacts of his attack on you, that has to be considered as a potential threat for your enemy also. If you are treating enemy in a totally irrational way, you are creating more dangerous world in the future. And all in all, I think the whole strategy of the United States and the Western countries regarding war in Ukraine is very bad, very bad. If we are adding to that sanctions, media treatment, political rhetorics, for example, rhetorics in which you are defining, we are civilization, you are enemy of civilization. This is very bad rhetorics, and this is very bad attitude, and the final outcome can be not peace, sustainable solution, but more problems in the future.
Thank you, President Tadic. In the interest of time, and I also want to just take a count, are there any questions in the audience? Yes, there are. Okay, so let's locate the mics. I will go back to Dr. Imdad Chaudhry Saab and once last to Daniel on the way forward, on strategies that would help countries realistically deal with these situations. Dr. Imdad already added that internal resilience building is very important. If you can briefly, if you want to add any other points, way forward.
Thank you. Oh.
I was just thinking about, and in fact, a very important tool would be RCI, Regional Cooperation and Integration. Unfortunately, this should have worked very well, but in our part of the world, as of now, the impact of RCI is not strong enough, especially in South Asia, possibly because of India and Pakistan's dispute over Kashmir, or SARC and its instruments have not been able to produce that. I was, in my own humble way, I was working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when SARC was formed in 1985. And when we were preparing the documents, we had so much of dreams, hopes and aspirations that SARC could transform the region from poverty to efficiency. But as I look at SARC now at this stage of my life, I think ASEAN would be a good example for SARC. Similarly, regional cooperation and integration could be a way to reduce impact of sanctions or other adverse economic impact. I won't go into the details. Other point, Arya, I'd like to mention is that there was talk about a national economic assistance strategy and policy assessment by ERD. I'm not sure whether it has been done as yet. I think it's high time to look at the impact of economic assistance for countries like Bangladesh. I'm quoting a figure of 5 years back. Actually, the total amount of foreign economic assistance to Bangladesh is less than 5% of the GDP. Please do correct me, you all are very well informed about it. It's only 5%, less than 4.5 or something. This is very important. On the other hand, we feel that international organization money is coming in, they are helping our key sectors and all that. So we need to assess and look at, revisit from the governance perspective. And CGS has reminded me this would be a very good work for CGS and all others who are supporters and who like CGS can help in that. Thirdly, I fully agree with Mr. Daniel and Mr. Anwar Parvez. The private sector is critical for us, actually. I would say it's extremely critical. Especially, I'll be very specific. If we don't make up a third or fourth generator of GDP, other than remittance and overseas employment, overseas ready-made garments, RMG and remittances. These two drivers have become tired. So we need to, and for that the private sector needs to be supported in the manner that it's not the conventional support, so that they can generate capital, further capital, and they can create additional sources for economic diversification of countries like Bangladesh. Lastly, I'd like to say, thanks for your patience for giving me this time. Lastly is that I believe side by side, the safety nets is something that the next budget, after the elections, I think the next budget, on one hand, should give substantive support, hear the voice of the private sector. I think there are a lot of sessions with them, but what they are trying to say, it means a lot for the country. See, our garment story is a story of tremendous success. Many countries can learn from Bangladesh, but at the same time, corruption, wastage of resources, inefficiency in the past have really caused a lot of damage. So my point is, it's time to look at the strengthening the private sector, economic diversification, and this also holds true for the whole of Bay of Bengal area, who have got similar economic structure. Safety nets and food security is something which should be very important, because food is the front line of human survival. So that, I think, should be important. And of course, as we all know very well, people at the center of all reforms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. Chaudhry Saab, would you like to add any strategies that you recommend in terms of way forward?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to say that for Bangladesh perspective, because it is very important that it is not only important for us, this country is important for other countries too, because it's 180 million people, and its economy size is not too small. It's a $560 billion market, and 30% are middle income group. So this is also attractive for other country too. But on the other hand, for us, we have to be believe, or all the industry people also believe, that we have to be very, very competitive in order to be produce the any product, you know. And though we have in a mind, or though we have already working to put up other sector to keep growing, like as I said, light engineering or blue economy, you know, or halal goods, things like that, or IT even, you know. So it is very important that the government has to be really active. And the nation actually needs the government mindset to be changed in order to be competitive over here. And globally, the government also, they should have taken a neutral policy. I mean, for us, it is better to have pursue the beamstake, as you know, as he have pointed out, that regional cooperation. Everybody is doing the regional cooperation will be very much needed right now. ASEAN, we can try. The SAARC, it didn't work out, but why not we try to work with India also? Because India and Bangladesh together is a huge number of population than the ASEAN population, if we look at it. We have to keep continue with the Chinese, you know, because that's also a big market for us. It has to be in our mind. And for example, UK and USA market, they will also need us. It's not that they can left us, because they also need this market. And at the same time, we need their market too, through our RMG sector. Today, it is very important for us, but so we have to make it very, should not lose that market share over there through our competitiveness. Then the China and India, we need their big support also for our infrastructure or IT, things like that. Here, we can get a big support, which we won't get it from the Western world, maybe, you know, because they will fight for them, their own interest. Oil is their own biggest control over here, you know, they need to be control on the oil. They need to control with the IT sector, you know, AI and things like that. But we don't have that kind of ambitious plan. But at least AI technology, we can bring it from the China. The semiconductor, we can maybe try to work in Bangladesh. That we can work with the China, and we should not, be very reluctant over here. Then the market diversifications. I think that it is very important that we should have, even in the garments, even with the other trades, we should have moved out, we should develop our own internal market dependency. We have to build up our market. Instead of import substitute product, we should have concentrate over here. So in order to do it, I think that what we will expect from all of you and also from the audience, that we must, because during this period, it is a big opportunity for Bangladesh to take the economic benefit. And in order to do it, let's try to pray that we should have an election and the democratic process should come forward, and only then Bangladesh industry, Bangladesh economy will survive. Whether it is an autocracy or it is a democracy, I don't care. Because whatever good for our economy, that is more important. Autocracy all over the world, maybe a lot of people have seen, even a Korean development comes because of the autocracy. Even a Taiwan economy comes with the autocracy, you know. So, but on the other hand, democracy is always been a good for any of the nations, but the process takes time to take any sort of decisions to be implemented, you know, or in any policy to be implemented. So let's pray for all of us that at least we should have come across with a election process. And otherwise, we may lose a big opportunity which is ahead for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Chaudhry Saab. Daniel, both senior economists and industrialists of Bangladesh have given us a long list of strategies. What would you like to add to that?
Well, I was listening very carefully, and I think towards the end, Parvez uncle mentioned something very interesting, that for an economy, it doesn't matter if you are heading towards a democracy or an autocracy. And it probably comes, or these sort of thought process usually stem from a bit of frustration with democracy in general, because it takes time. Check and balances always takes time. And as a result, a lot of times, autocracy seems to be a very attractive proposition. However, we have flirted with autocracy for the last couple of years, almost a decade, and the end result is we have not really built on anything other than garments industry. And the garments industry's building blocks were built basically in the late 70s and in the early 80s. And while we were talking about financial issues that we are facing today, one of the financial issues that the garments industry in Bangladesh faced back in the 80s, early 80s and late 70s, was a lack of capital. Now, this is a very interesting concept that was actually developed here locally by the local bankers and the brilliant entrepreneurs such as Uncle and my forefathers. By forefathers, I mean anyone who started the garments industry. I'm the second generation. So in that way, a lot of the first generation garments manufacturers, they realized that the biggest need for capital and the shortage of it was in terms of working capital. And so let's say you set up a factory for 300 machines. It's not going to cost you a lot, but it's going to cost you a lot more, like 10x, just to get the raw materials running the factory for 3 months. So what they did, they invented a policy called the back-to-back LC policy. You bring a master LC from your buyer, and then you leverage that LC, and you open up to 70%, 80%, depending on the relationship. And you also get a PC, which is packing credit, so you pay your salaries. So that is the way you were able to, this industry was able to become as big as it is today. The scalability was because of this financial marvel that was basically created because of a local problem. The one issue where, in theory, we have moved away is that we have become overtly reliant on foreign consultant. And one of the problems with foreign consultants is that they're filled with MBAs who know a lot of things but really don't know about anything. So you need to know the ground reality. Now, the ground reality is when you face a problem, you try and find a native solution to it. A solution that will work in New Delhi might not work in Dhaka. A solution that might work in Beijing might not work here. So these sort of problems that you see has happened in elsewhere, you can take probably an example out of it, but you can't really copy and paste it in Bangladesh because Bangladesh is very different. So for me, what I would love to see is, of course, a sustained democracy for the next couple of decades, at least, hopefully longer. But more importantly, I would also like to see self-reliance and building up our own system, our own ecosystems, whether it is through blockchain payment systems so that we are not cut off from the payment gateway system. Tomorrow, if due to non-alignment, if we are also sanctioned, you never know, because we were just discussing earlier that a couple of years ago, you used to look at a country's policy-making decision history. Now you wake up and see what Mr. Donald Trump is tweeting. And based on his mood, things can change. Yesterday, $2.7 trillion was wiped out of the US markets. But the headlines were he was greeting Mamdani rather cordially. So that kind of changing of perspective, changing of storyline, we need to also adapt to it. We need to have our own independent, native solution to our problems. We need to become more independent. If you look at various industries, it's not just garments industry, there are various other industries that are flourishing. I'm part of insurance industry, both life and non-life. And I can say very proudly that I'm part of a company that serves over 1.1 million customers and is the fastest to claim settlement. It's a little company named Shonari Life Insurance Company, and then they've done brilliantly. But the problem that we see suddenly now, while we are fastly evolving, serving 1.1 million customers, suddenly we see that because of a lot of changes that's happening globally, the reinsurance capabilities have suddenly become very difficult to get the best rates, to get the best coverage. And you see, recently we had an accident in the export village inside the Dhaka International Airport terminal. Even then, we had a difficulty accessing proper reinsurance. So at the end of the day, what really needs to happen is policy making for the betterment of the industry, deregulation of industry. One of the key aspects as to why garments industry was a success was garments industry was never really regulated by the local regulators. And hopefully other industries will also get the same sort of benefit in terms of policy rather than subsidies. What we need is policy support from the government and an understanding. So hopefully we'll see that in the next couple of days.
Thank you so much. You continue to maintain your people-centered voice, which is very, very important. So the organizers told me to end the session, but I requested if we can have one question. Okay, come. There are 4 people standing. No statements. Just please state your question, all of them, and we'll just take one round and that's it. Please.
Yeah, my question was about the diversification of our foreign reserve. Like, given the sanctions and everything, there's a volatile situation that's going on. Almost all our foreign currency is based on US dollar. And so with the changing scenarios, isn't it better that we have a diversified foreign reserve, I mean in gold and other currencies?
Okay, diversified foreign reserves, whether that's a good idea or not. Sir, yes, please state your question. And sorry, very sorry that we have to
Good
do it
evening.
quickly.
This is Tanvir Mohammad Dipu. I am from private sector. Can I ask a different question to the Excellency of President Serbia, ex-president? Once upon a time, USSR, United States of Soviet Russia, maximum European countries were engaged in USSR. But now the time, maximum European countries are trying to join the European Union. EU enlargement, they are ready to member to EU. So my question basically, will this European Union enlargement, will this EU enlargement be long-lasting? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry, but we'll have to just take these 2 questions. So the first was whether it's a good idea to have diversified reserves. Who from our experts can take this question? And then the second question was for President Tadic, and we'll go to that at the end.
You see, our export is about $44 billion. And our import is almost like a 60, I mean, last financial year take is about $62 billion, you know. And our import is $62 billion. Our import, about 31% is coming from China, 14% is coming from India, and the rest is mostly with some is Brazil, some is Mexico, and also Middle East country. So when we can see that our trade, the trade pattern, then we can see that for us it is better to have the dollar in reserve. Of course, maybe some quantity, because with India and China, our export is not that much compared to the import what we do from China or India. China, we are exporting only $900 million, and we are importing almost like $18 billion. And from India, it is a $2 billion we're exporting, and about $10 billion we are importing. So in Indian currency, we can keep something, we can trade off, and with the Chinese, maybe some of it. But so far, for us, it is better to have still with a dollar, and some of it definitely for our own safety, some diversification if needed. I think that Indian and the yuan, we can keep it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. President Tadic, would you like to briefly respond to the question on EU enlargement?
I mean, one of the main reasons why we wanted to join European Union was to change the structure of our economy. The foreign trade deficit was huge in Serbia, and that was making our society weaker, our economy weaker, and we wanted to join the European Union and to have a balance in trading deficit. And we did it during the negotiations about our membership. But regarding the strategic issue of enlargement of European Union, right now we see new moments. First of all, second term of Donald Trump is bringing in European Union a totally different atmosphere. When Donald Trump have said, if you are not contributing to the NATO with a higher budgetary expenditure, 5%, more than 5%, we are not going to be anymore your protector. That immediately changed whole atmosphere in European Union nowadays. Second, when Donald Trump was raising taxation also for European Union countries, that created something very different in comparison with the previous time. And in that respect, European Union has a first time guess that they are alone and they have to project their future as a totally new entity separated from United States, and economy of United States, and defense strategy of United States. And we'll see what is going to be final outcome of that, and in that respect, what is going to be with enlargement process. But all in all, I think that European Union failed in terms of enlargement process, because if European Union is not going to be completed, if there are empty zones on the European continent, for example, Western Balkans, some other players are going to come. In this very sensitive zone of strategically and geographically of European countries, European continent, and finally European Union. There is no empty space, neither in human cells nor in politics. If European Union is not going to be on the Western Balkans, in Moldova, for example, Turkey, Russia, or China are going to be there. If Turkey, Russia, and China are going to be there, European Union is not going to be coherent and able to find strategical solutions for the problems and challenges European Union is facing with. And finally, what is characterizing enlargement process last decade? Enlargement fatigue. European Union citizens, they have a fatigue because of migrations and because of economic problems and political problems, and this is not very popular to think about enlargement right now in European Union. But formally, European leaders and the members of European Commission are saying enlargement process is continuing. But in fact, in reality, after Croatia, we didn't have an enlargement process. Croatia was named in the book of Huntington, Clash of Civilization, which was mentioning that only Western Christian countries are political civilization. If that is the strategy of European Union, I think European Union is going to fail massively and strategically, and that entity, and that phenomena is not going to be able to compete in global arena economically and in terms of geostrategy and in terms of defense. I can continue in many different directions, but right now I'm stopping because I want to see my country as a member state of European Union. I do not want to see European Union leaders to refuse my country.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your participation. Please join me in thanking this people-centered, forward-looking, and very practical discussion on the politics of money. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, speakers, for the valuable critical discussions. May I kindly request our distinguished speaker to please come forward for the quick photo session. May I have everyone's attention, please? We'll now move to the tea break at Oasis. After the break, the parallel sessions will begin at 6:30 p.m. in Magna, Podda, Shurma, and Chitra. We kindly requested only invited participants to join on time. And those who have received invitations for the parallel session tomorrow morning are kindly requested to arrive by 9:30 a.m. Thank you.